Well, here are our 5 Platonic solids in the excavated form again, to which I was introduced so many years ago. And more recently, I've been looking at the Archimedean solids. Archimedes worked on Plato's solids, and he operated on them in various ways to produce a set of 13 more solids called the Archimedean solids. And he allowed himself, instead of just using a single regular polygon, he allowed himself to use 2 or 3 of them in the generation of these 13. Now there are only 9 of them here, 9 of the 13 are here, and they've also been made and presented in the excavated form, which a lot of people find very attractive. Working with these solids and looking at their geometry, there are always wonderful things to discover. And for instance, if you take the truncated octahedron, now how did he get that? He divided each side of the octahedron in 3 exactly, and then he joined those points. So I hope you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-sided figure. If you join those points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, giving you the hexagon of the truncated octahedron. And then if you look at it like this, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, which is going to give you the square. But studying the geometry of this, which will be the subject of another video, it was discovered that the sharp angle, the acute angle right at the center of this shape, happens to be exactly the same as the most acute angle of the 3, 4, 5 triangle. It fits perfectly, you can see that, and it can be proved with a little Pythagoras and similar triangles that that's the case. So, as so often in mathematics, as you explore, you come across old friends that you've known for a long time, and like this triangle that has been used for so many millennia to set up a right angle corner for builders and architects. But there's more and more that you discover, and some of these shapes rejoice in wonderful names like this one, which is a rhombi-cosi-dodecahedron. And when I say that word, I rather expect something like a sprite or a genie to appear, or possibly even a leprechaun. But there's, of course, a good mathematical reason why it's called a rhombi-cosi-dodecahedron. This one here is a truncated dodecahedron. So same thing again, dividing this length into 3 and joining the points where it's divided into 3 will give you this shape, which is a truncated dodecahedron, and so on with the other ones. And all of them will be available on our website, the Project Delta website. Now, it turns out that this is related to the human form in quite a simple way. Let's get this set up. So there's the tetrahedron, there's the cube, here's the octahedron, the icosahedron, and the dodecahedron. Now let's just consider this shape here. This model was purchased at the Leonardo da Vinci Museum in Rome a few years ago, and it's rather beautiful because it shows the human form, the Vitruvian man, in his square and in his circle, and those would be all the points which a human being can touch if the center, the navel, is kept in the same position. So by turning around like this, they can make a circle around here, and so on. So you might consider this sphere to be a person's personal space. they would feel uncomfortable if anyone came within it. And there are some very simple ratios in this figure which interest mathematicians. For instance, the distance from one fingertip to the other as you stretch out your arms turns out to be the same as your height. Everybody knows that, and it's the simplest possible ratio, 1 to 1. Again, the distance from the bottom of your feet to your navel compared to the distance from your navel to the top of the head is what's called the golden ratio, which is about 1.618 to 1. Also was strictly root 5 plus 1 all divided by 2 to 1. And it turns up across the natural world in many ways, in sunflowers, and my friend Dr. Stewart, who studies electrical engineering, tells me it turns up in his field in many different ways as well. Now, the human being begins life as a sphere. And there's no question about this. A fertilized egg is roughly spherical in shape. And so it divides into two. You need a plane. If you're doing this geometrically, there's your mirror line or your mirror plane, and it somehow divides itself into two. So that's the first step. First you have one single fertilized egg, and it divides into two pretty spherical cells. And after that, it divides into 4, 8, 16, which is an exponential series. That's 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1, 2 to the 2, 2 to the 3, and so forth. And moves on to the 30 million cells that make up a human body. And you really need an exponential series to get so far so fast. So the first division is into 2. Now the next division is going to be into 4. And this is where this whole process takes advantage, one might say, of the tetrahedral division of space into 4. And then into 8. And that's the octahedral division of space. I've got a slightly different scale of spheres here, but you can see the octahedron divides space into 8. And sometimes the cells may arrange themselves in an octahedral form. So that's the beginning of life, is making use of the divisions of space that the Platonic solids provide. But there's more, because when Archimedes was working on the cube and the octahedron, although this might actually have been Plato, strictly speaking, who did this first, he found that if you take the center of the edges of either of these two shapes and join them all up, you will get the cube octahedron. How does that work? If you join that point to that point to that point to that point, you'll get the square. And if you look down an axis and join that point to that point to that point, you'll see a triangle, and there's the triangle. You can work out for yourself that the same is going to happen here, because if you join the midpoints 1, 2, 3, that's going to give you the triangle. And if you join the centers of the edges and look down the axis 1, 2, 3, 4, that's going to give you the square. So whichever one of them you use, if you join the centers of the sides, you'll get the shape. And it's taken a long time for these thoughts to join themselves up in my mind, but the ratio between that side and this side is 1 to 1, because that is a perfect equilateral triangle. So the same ratio that stands in the human form can be found in this cube octahedron. And then, perhaps even more surprising, if you join the centres of the edges of either a dodecahedron or an icosahedron, you get this lovely shape, which is called an icosydodecahedron. And working the geometry of it, which it's intended will be done in another video, you find that the ratio between the edge length and the radius is the golden ratio, which we've mentioned before and which turns up in the human form. So this is a signal fact and a sign to those who think that the proportions of the human body are shared with the proportions of these fundamental shapes. There's a strange kinship between our form and these 5 fundamental shapes. But what's it a sign of? What does it mean? There's a word, in concinnity, not much used, which means a note out of place or something where it shouldn't be. And the opposite of this, the opposite is concinnity, the sense of everything being in place, a sense of everything being together as one. And when we encounter this feeling, we have a sense of wonder. And wonder, according to Albert Einstein, is the beginning of all science.